I'm joined on the line by Dr. Tomás Mac Conmara of Mac Conmara Heritage Consulting, because Connemara oral recordings are sought in an exciting new heritage project. He's going to tell us all about that now. Dr. Tomás, good morning. Tell us about this exciting initiative.
Yeah, look, very happy to, and thanks a million for the opportunity. First of all, we began the project back in 2023 with Marie Mannion of Galway County Council Heritage Office to document oral recordings that had been undertaken, or collections of oral recordings that had been undertaken in East Galway. So this year we've moved to Connemara, but the basic premise of the project is to identify collections of oral recordings, be that, a single tape recording with an elderly woman, or, a digitized collection on a particular theme within the area of East Galway last year, but this year in Connemara. And we're aware that there have been people who, through their own individual efforts or their community groups, or even from the university perspective in terms of scholarship, have undertaken these recordings and documented the memories of people on such a wide variety of subjects. But the difficulty is that many of these collections and recordings have ended up either in offices or in shoeboxes in attics, or in collections that just for different reasons have never been accessed. So in the main, the project is about identifying all of those collections, compiling a really comprehensive list of the material, where it is, what status it is in, how can it be accessed, formats and so on. And at the individual level, a really comprehensive understanding of the amount of recorded memory and oral history that is available in this context of 2024 in relation to the Connemara area.
What have you got so far, and what sort of stuff are you looking for?
Well, we're only beginning the project at the moment, but we've done a desktop scoping exercise, and that would certainly indicate that there is a huge amount of material out there relating to Connemara. And, in one sense, that gives us an indication of what is kind of publicly identifiable rather than even accessible, because you might read about a project that was undertaken where people's memories were recorded in a part of Connemara, but that doesn't mean the material is accessible. But we know what's publicly identifiable, but we're now reaching out through the press and the media to try and identify the more, hidden collections. So that's the type of, if there's a listener today that has a recording in their attic, or a recording in a box somewhere that they did before with their grandfather or grandmother or neighbour, or as I said, a series of them, but have never done anything with them, we'd like to hear from them, because we can work with them to create collection level descriptions, to identify the different characteristics of the collection, and then provide advice if advice is required in order to better make use of that material ultimately. So in terms of what we're looking for, it's very, very broad, in the sense that if it is memory, historical reflection, tradition, folklore, customs and so on relating to the Connemara area, or with people in other parts of the country or other parts of the world about Connemara, then we want to hear about those.
And you are in the Gaeltacht there, and Maishivagiri, piseógí, all three Gaelga.
Oh, look at Tom Keane go mail on tri van na Gaelge, mar hanna hen an Iderlin is federling echail gohfuil an a chuid dienta ingailge. So, Tommy Lawn Sausta agus ansim going of a kind of dina le tafe di Nuenrod ha dienta tri van na Gaelge.
Now, I know that Marie Mannion, the Heritage Officer for the County of Galway, completed a similar audit in the east of the county. So will that help, I suppose, you drive this in the Connemara region? Now, what sort of areas are you covering? Is it all of Connemara, or where are you focusing in on?
Yeah, we're covering the whole Connemara district. So last year we were delighted to work with Marie on the East Galway area, so we would have covered that area comprehensively, and that is still live. So there are some people who are still in contact with us with material that they've identified since, but certainly we're going across the entire Connemara district. We decided when we sat down first to look at developing the project, we looked at breaking up the county, because it's such a rich county obviously in terms of cultural heritage, and we were aware of the scope of it and the limitations we would have in terms of how much we could get done within within the calendar year. So we decided to leave Connemara on its own to cover within 2024. And, while it's going to be a daunting task in some sense, we're very confident we'll be able to capture, a significant amount of material. We've already been obviously identifying, people within, heritage groups and community groups within Connemara, historians and so on. And we've been liaising with those to try and, I guess promote the project as well as identify material. And that's been really positive in terms of the response we've gotten so far.
Very important to do it now, I think, because a lot of these recordings, they might be on fragile tapes that they could get damaged and they could be lost forever.
Well, you're completely right, and it's actually a really, really important point because, the general consensus internationally on the types of, legacy formats, let's say, for example, the cassette tape would be by 2030 or thereabouts, you'll have reached a point where it's going to be increasingly difficult and in many cases impossible to digitize that material. So, there's a real urgency to identify, particularly those types of collections that are on the legacy format, whether it's reel-to-reel or even we would have identified in previous projects in places like Kilkenny acetate recordings that hadn't been digitized, and these were going back to the 1950s. So that legacy material is really, really critical because of its fragility, but also because of the fact that it was recorded in some cases 40, 50 years ago, and therefore the memories documented would stretch much further back. And therefore are in some cases far more precious. So there is a real time imperative and urgency associated with this. But equally, the general point should be made that, I've always worked according to the impulse. I've been recording people since I was a teenager, and it was always the impulse to document before it's lost. But I'm aware from professional work over many years that the vast majority of recordings never actually get played, if that makes sense. So, because usually when the recordings are done, there's a sort of vacuum because the people feel, oh, well, I've recorded the memories of that 90-year-old man, and if they're not lost, but there isn't that usual pivot onto the public getting to hear that material. So this audit and these audits are really, really important to identify what's out there, and that better helps us maybe to kind of engineer that pivot so that the public start listening more to the voices of our past that have been documented in places like Connemara.
And this will all be added to the work done by the Folklore Commission. It's a huge body of work and a great resource for historians and scholars and even the general public.
Oh, it would be very, very important. And again, one of the things that we do in the company is to try and identify the potential cultural or educational value of this material. And in an educational context, from primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, this material is hugely valuable. And one tape recording with an old woman from Roundstone can be of value to people at a primary level in terms of finding out about the past, at a secondary level in terms of investigating place, or at a third level whereby they might be examining linguistics, for example. So there's a real layered value to the material that we will be documenting. So we're really energetic and enthusiastic about trying to ensure that we do as well as we can for Connemara to ensure that we've identified all that material. And it is important, just to make one final point as well, that while initially our aim is to identify and list the material, we're not necessarily trying to take the material from people. Now obviously if people want to deposit it within Galway County Council, then that obviously can be facilitated, but we're primarily want to talk to people to find out about the great work that they've done or the collections that they have, whether they've inherited them or not, and pull that information together so that we have a greater sense of what has been recorded across Connemara or about Connemara, because I repeat that it's very important. Whether you could have a Connemara man who's obviously recorded in America, where we work with archives out there to try and identify what they have. You could have a Connemara man recorded in Donegal, as part of a project up there. So we'll be looking outside of Connemara for Connemara material as well.
I know a lot of work was done in the 30s and 40s by Prunchis de Burka in this regard.
Sorry, I missed that last piece.
No, I said a lot of work was done by Prunchis de Burka in this regard back in the 30s and 40s in Connemara.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we know obviously that from the Folklore Commission that there was really dedicated collectors, and Prunchies the Burka was certainly one of those. And, some of the material from the Folklore Commission, as we know, is available online, but we'll also be trying to compile a list from within the Folklore Collection, the National Folklore Collection, as to what has been documented relating to Connemara, just to make it that little bit easier, I think, for enthusiasts from the area who want to identify the material in there. But obviously, because the Folklore Commission, when they were established, were primarily interested in Gaeltacht areas, then Connemara was always likely to be a key focus, and it was very important to get and to mobilise people like Prunchies the Burka in those areas, because he would know them, he'd know the landscape, he'd know the place and the people, and was able to access and document that in a way that many others couldn't. So the work he has done is hugely valuable in this context as well.
All right, it's going to be a busy few months for you, Tomás. I know that the audit will be completed by October time, so I suppose it's all hands on deck between now and then.
It is, yeah. I mean, and look, we've worked on projects previously in counties like Kilkenny and Westmeath and Donegal and Cork and so on, and we have a good methodology, we have a good approach to this, but at the centre of it, is that myself and the people working with me and the team would be very focused on the human stories, not just of the ones that are recorded, but the people who've done the recording. And so we want to reach out. It's not just people who have a really kind of catalogued digital collection of oral history. It's that person that took out the tape recorder in the 1980s or 1990s or even more recent to that, and recorded the memories of when a man or a woman that they felt that those memories shouldn't be lost. And we'll be very, very easy to engage with, easy to talk to, and we'll be delighted to hear from any of your listeners that just even they want to find out, is their material relevant, or to have a chat with us about that. We'll be very happy to hear from them.
Yeah, what's the best way of them making contact with you in that regard?
Well, directly they can contact Mac Conmara Heritage at gmail.com, or they can ring 087 916 0373 to get direct contact with us. And obviously Marie Mannion, the Heritage Officer in County Galway, will be very well known to your listeners. If people want to contact her directly in Galway Heritage Office, they can do so within Galway County Council, and any information or requests will be passed on to us then as well.
And then that audit is going to be online from October time, is it?
It might be a little bit after October when the actual audit goes up online, but our plan is to have it completed as a project by October. Sometimes there can be a little bit of spillover, as you can imagine, with these, and there will be a little bit of work then to actually make that material available online. But the plan would be that in some form, at the very least, the report will be up online between October and the end of the year, so to give people a sense of what has been documented. And we hope as well through media like yourselves that we'll update on the project throughout the summer as things are developing throughout the months of the summer.
All right, Dr. Tomás Mac Conmara of Mac Conmara Heritage Consulting, thank you for joining us in Galway Talks, and do keep us up to date on that project.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much for the support.